Good afternoon, dear students. In the last lecture, we have discussed that the macroeconomist is entrusted to draw a macroeconomic model. So, as we know that in order to know about the economic relationship between two or more than two variables, we need to use the functional form. So, the functional form is a mathematical notation which shows the relationship between two or more than two variables. And we have discussed that there are two kinds of variables in an economic model. The first one is endogenous variables, the second one is exogenous variables. We have also discussed that endogenous variables are those variables which we are included in the economic model, whereas exogenous variables are those variables which we don't include in the economic model. So, we keep them as constant in order to simplify our analysis. Then we have discussed that suppose the economist is entrusted to find out that how different consumers behave in a market and how sellers behave in a market. So, for the construction of a model, for the formulation of a model, we need three important aspects: behavior of consumers, number second, behavior of producer, number third, the market where buyers and sellers interact with each other. So, now I am focusing the first aspect of economic model. I mean the market for cars. We were discussing about the example of buying and selling of new cars. So, the first aspect of economic model is the market for cars, I mean demand. So, as we know that the demand equation shows us that the quantity demanded of a commodity depends on the price of the commodity and the income of the consumer. So, that is why we can write that quantity demanded is the function of P and Y. P stands for price of the commodity and Y stands for income of the consumer. If we draw the demand curve for that particular commodity, we can get this demand curve which has a negative slope. So, the demand curve shows the relationship between quantity demanded and price, other things equal. It means that this demand curve is just showing the relationship between the price of the commodity and the quantity demanded of that particular commodity, whereas other determinants of the demand function are the same in this analysis. What are other functions? What are other determinants? What are other important factors affecting the quantity demanded of a particular commodity? It includes price of substitute commodities, taste of the consumer, size of the population, advertising expenditures, and different other determinants that are affecting the quantity demanded of a particular commodity. So, this is a demand curve which is having a negative downward slope from left to right. So, this demand curve shows the negative relationship between price of the commodity and quantity demanded. Now, I am going to discuss about the second important aspect of economic model, which is known as the market for cars. It means that now we are discussing the supply side, the seller behavior. What are the factors affecting the supply of a product? So, the supply equation is equal to quantity supply of a commodity. Commodity is, in this example, we have buying and selling of a new car. So, car is the commodity. So supply equation equals to quantity supply is equal to S, P and PS. P is the price of car and is the price of input, for example steel. So it means that quantity supply of new cars depends on the price of car and input of car like steel, or there may be other important factors affecting the quantity demanded except the steel. So if we draw the supply curve, we can get the following supply curve, which shows the relationship between price of the commodity, mean price of the new car, and quantity supplied of that car. So the supply curve shows the relationship between quantity supplied and price, other things equal. Look at this graph. The graph is moving upward. It means that the slope of this graph is positive. The slope of this graph is positive. It increases from origin towards the right side. It means that if price of the commodity increases, the producer will increase supply of that particular product. If price of car increases in market, this is a signal for producer to increase the supply of new cars in the market in order to get more revenue, in order to achieve more profit. That's why the slope of this supply curve is positive. Now, this is the third important side or aspect of market formulation of economic model. First we have discussed demand side, after that we have discussed supply side. Now we are discussing the third aspect of economic model, which is known as the market for cars. It means equilibrium position. Market is that area or that location or that arrangement where buyers and sellers come into contact for the purpose of purchasing and selling. Means the consumer is interested to purchase something and the producer is interested to sell something in that market at a given price. So the price and quantity will be settled in the market. So the equilibrium condition is that quantity demanded is equal to quantity supplied. As I told you that the slope of the demand curve is negative, whereas the slope of the supply curve is positive. So the market condition is that position where quantity demanded equals quantity supply. So when quantity, the slope of demand curve and the slope of supply curve become equal at a point, that is known as market equilibrium. So in this example, quantity demanded and quantity supply, both curves touch both curve touches at a point E, which is known as market equilibrium point. At that point, P is the equilibrium price, which we generally denoted by PE, and the equilibrium quantity is denoted by QE. It means that PE is that price on which consumers are ready to buy something, as well as producers are also ready to offer something for sale. So this is the market clearing price. At this price, producers are ready to sell as much amount as consumer desires to get. So demand is equal to supply. That's why point E is known as market equilibrium point. P is the equilibrium price or market clearing price, and Q is the equilibrium quantity. Suppose if Q is equal to 50, it means that the consumers desire to get 50 new cars in a particular market. On the other hand, it also means that the producers are ready to sell 50 new cars in that market per particular price. So it means that quantity demanded is equal to quantity supply at that particular price. That's why it is known as market clearing price. Now the question is that how changes in exogenous variables affect the behavior of endogenous variable in the market. For example, the effect of an increase in income. In the demand function, I told you that quantity demanded totally depends on price of the commodity and income of the consumer. But at that time income was constant. Now we are changing income of the consumer. So income was exogenous variable in that case. Income was exogenous variable in that case. Now we are changing exogenous variable. It means that we are increasing income of the consumer, and we are interested to show how change in income affect the quantity demanded. So if income increases of the consumer, it means that the consumer is now having more purchasing power. The consumer have more money to spend in the market. So he will increase demand for buying new cars. So with the increase in income, the demand curve of the consumer will totally shift to the right side because of the increase in income. However, if there is a decrease in income, the demand curve will shift towards the left side. In this case, we have an increase in income. That's why the demand curve will shift towards the right. If the demand curve shifts towards the right side, the price will increase in the market as well as quantity will also increase in the market, because due to increase in income, quantity demanded of consumer rises, due to which equilibrium price and quantity both will rise, because supply of new cars in that short period of time remains fixed. So with the increase in income, equilibrium price and quantity both will change. Now the second example is the effect of a steel price increases. As we know that steel is an input for a producer supply. Now if there is an increase in the price of steel, how it will affect the supply, how it will affect the market equilibrium position. We have discussed the supply equation, that supply quantity supplied depends on price of the commodity as well as price of input, which is price of steel. So P is mean price of steel, P means price of the new car. This is the original market equilibrium position. Now an increase in PS, if there is an increase in PS, it means that if there is an increase in the price of steel, so an increase in price of steel reduces the quantity of cars producer supply at each price. It means that supply curve will shift towards the left side. Why? Because if there is an increase in the price of steel, the producer will reduce its supply in the market, because the input is now more expensive for him. That's why the supply curve will shift towards the left side, which increases the market price and reduces the quantity. So due to the increase in the price of steel, the market price will increase, but the quantity will be reduced. So that's why the supply curve will shift towards the left side. The price will increases from P1 to P2, but the quantity will be reduced from Q1 to Q2 in the market. So this was the case, that how exogenous variables affect endogenous variables. Quantity demanded, price and quantity supply, they are endogenous variables. However, income, price of steel, they are exogenous variable. And in this example, we have shown that how exogenous variables, how changes in exogenous variables affect the endogenous variables. In this example, the values of endogenous variables are determined in the model. The value of endogenous variables are determined in the model. However, the value of exogenous variables are determined outside the model. It means that the model takes their values and behavior as given. Like in the original example of quantity demanded, market for the new cars. So, in the original example, we have shown that quantity demanded is the function of price, but quantity demanded of a commodity also depends on income. But for the sake of simplicity, we have kept income of the consumer as constant. Then we have changed income of the consumer, and we have realized that yes, there is an increase in quantity demanded of a consumer, and the demand curve shift towards the right side. So, in the model of supply and demand for new cars, we have 5 variables. We have 5 variables. 3 of them are endogenous variables and the rest 2 are exogenous variables. Price of the commodity, quantity demanded for the commodity and quantity supply of the commodity. All these 3 variables are endogenous variables because the model is trying to explain their behavior. These are the variables whose value are determined in the model, in the given supply and demand model. However, we have 2 exogenous variables. One is income and the second is price of steel. Income was the exogenous variable for the case of demand. However, price of steel was the exogenous variable in the example of supply. So, we have shown that how change in consumer income and how change in the price of steel affect the demand and supply for new cars, how they will affect the demand and supply model for new car. So, it is hope that now you have a clear idea about how we can get market equilibrium, how exogenous variables can affect endogenous variable. If still you are confused about anything, if still you are not clear about endogenous variables, exogenous variables, how changes in exogenous variables brought changes in endogenous variables, you can ask me questions. I will try my level best to clarify your idea, to make clear your idea. It is hope that now you can understand all these things. If still you have any problem, you can ask me. Thank you so much.